Okay, folks, welcome to the Cheeseheads podcast, which is a podcast that we are starting on the Primetime Sports Talk YouTube channel. My name is MJ. I'm here with Mason and Chris, who are both writers at Primetime Sports Talk, and we are three delusional Packers fans. So that is what you are getting yourselves into. Be prepared for 60 minutes of insanity, give or take, and we will be coming at you every week. This will be posted on Tuesday, recorded on Monday. So that is what you are in for. Without further ado, Mason and Chris, we can start with Mason. Introduce yourselves a little bit. I do too many things that people don't care. So Mason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I started writing for Primetime Sports Talk in July of 2019. I originally started as a fantasy football writer, which turned into NFL and then NFL draft content. MJ and I were both part of the fantasy football start, sits, and sleepers all year long. And now I'm pretty much, I like to call myself the head of the draft content, but Mike doesn't allow that. So
the intern, yeah.
The intern. It is what it is, I guess. But I primarily do a lot of draft content, scouting reports, mock drafts, all that. But again, I'm just an intern apparently. So.
Yeah.
Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? I started with Primetime Sports Talk, I think back in April or May. I can't even remember now. And it's funny because I was just kind of a football fan. I didn't really have that many written pieces published, and I sent one to Mike and Johnny, like, hey, this kid's got some talent, we'll give him a job. And the rest is history ever since. I'm excited because the NFL offseason, it feels like the Super Bowl was a week ago, but we're kind of heating up already. There's some good players that are going to get released over the next couple of weeks. The new league years start to set March 15th or something, free agency, the draft. So I'm excited to talk with you boys, and let's get going.
Fantastic. So what we are going to be doing today is breaking down the Green Bay Packers situation, position by position. But first, I think what Chris said he wanted to do before we get into that is just real quick run through our takeaways from 2020, albeit a very odd season.
Yeah.
But just one or two things, positive, negative, whatever we want to do. We'll go on to Mason's favorite topic much later. So, hold yourself back if you can. Don't we're not going to say the word yet. Hold yourself back. But we'll go reverse order. We'll start with Chris. Give us a couple takeaways from the year.
My biggest takeaway, I have two. One was the development of Aaron Rodgers in his second year in Matt LaFleur's system. I think we really saw the Packers utilize the running game more, live off the play action pass. I think Rodgers looked a lot more comfortable than we saw him look a year ago. And the other one for me is the development of young players. I thought Rashawn Gary showed flashes of becoming that every down pass rusher for the Packers. I thought Robert Tonyan had an outstanding season, snubbed from the Pro Bowl. We'll save that for another episode.
Oh, gosh.
And I thought players like Darnell Savage and others showed that they can be players in this league, and they're going to be good for the Packers for years to come.
Mason.
One positive that I took away was, like Chris said, Robert Tonyan. He was pretty much – I thought he was going to be like a second or third stringer at the start of training camp, and reports were during practices he was running with the first team, which I'm a big Jay Sternberger guy, so that kind of disappointed me. But yet, watching Tonyan just explode onto the scene this year was pretty cool, and I hope that he can continue it, but I also hope that Sternberger can kind of develop and stay healthy. A negative would probably be injuries, I guess, because Bakhtiari got hurt at the end of the season, which pretty much, I wouldn't say really ruined our game against Tampa Bay in that NFC Championship, but it did drastically hurt us.
Brutal loss.
Yeah, because we had like Rick Wagner playing right tackle and then Billy Turner playing left, which is fine, but against Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett, it doesn't work out so great.
No, it does not.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
So I think my biggest positive, and this is something I saw specifically at the end of the year, and I've been preaching this to anybody who could listen, although I don't think in our group chat because it's a little wordy, but I don't know if you guys saw specifically MVS in the last couple games. First of all, there's the number that's being thrown out all over NFL Twitter right now. He's basically the best deep ball receiver other than Tyreek Hill in the NFL in the last couple of years, which is, I mean, it doesn't surprise me because that's pretty much all he's done in the last couple of years, not to bash the guy. But it's first of all, you have him as your number 3, basically. That's a pretty good start, right? So that's been very impressive to me. But the thing I really liked the last couple of games was his footwork started to really improve. He started doing a lot of the things that Davante Adams does. And obviously not to that level, but I saw incredible footwork. He was getting releases. He was starting to get involved in the crossing route game and the slant game and the things that Davante does really well. And I'm just sitting here imagining if next year MVS can even be half of the guy in that short 5, 10, 15-yard game that Davante Adams is, then they have to respect him there and they have to actually press him. Heaven forbid what he's going to do running deep in that. So that was my biggest positive. Just the footwork and the technical skills that he was able to produce in the last few weeks specifically. I never noticed that in the regular season even, but just in the last 2 playoff games, I was very impressed with that. My negative, I don't know. I think our defense followed a very specific pattern. And I would have loved personally when we get a big lead, and I say we, I hate when people do that. You know what I mean? When the Packers get a big lead, I would like to see them, actually keep it and keep playing the same type of defense that got them that lead. And maybe some of that will be alleviated with Mike Pettin being gone. Maybe some of that won't. I don't really know. But if they could just put teams away and not have to make me lose my insanity or lose my sanity in the third and fourth quarter, that would make me really happy personally.
I guess Chris
Mason, I don't know if you have any comments to that.
No, I think Chris is gone. I don't know where he went.
Yeah, I think Chris's internet. He said MJ keeps cutting out, but Mason was fine the whole time. So I think that's just Chris. He's back. Chris, are you here?
Sorry.
Check. I thought Mason was the one with the bad internet.
I'm at my dad's, so we're good.
You're good? Okay. Well, maybe we
get
Chris some Ethernet.
I was gonna add on to your point about MVS, like when he presses, when a defender presses on him off the line of scrimmage, it's kind of similar to what happened in the last game against Chicago, where he was lined up against Danny Trevathan, and that did not end well for Chicago at all. But again, just like Sternberger, when Packers drafted MVS, I was really happy. He's actually the only Packer player that I have a jersey that fits for me right now, which it's difficult because all the times that you see him like drop passes, the fumble against Indianapolis, it's just like, it's frustrating, but you can see just what he can be if he figures out his consistency and his drop issues.
I think the thing about MVS is he's such a polarizing figure in that you have to take the bad with the good, because there's a few plays every game I find with MVS that he's good for a long reception, a long touchdown catch. And the Packers really needed him and relied on him a lot of times this year to make a big play on third down when, you can only be so reliant on Davante Adams and Aaron Jones, where they need that guy to step up behind those two. And I thought, obviously, a lot of bad with MVS, but in big moments he did step up.
So any last takeaways, comments before I turn this over to Mason for the positional breakdown?
I don't have anything.
Nope.
Okay.
For me.
So I'm going to share my screen real quick. We're going to test this out and see how it looks, just to show everybody what we are working with real quick. So we have our little breakdown here. We're going to go position by position. Mason has broken it down. Just a couple of things to clarify. We have defensive line, which pretty much means more of the interior defensive line, edge rushers. So the Smith brothers, Gary, etc. Then we have the position to not be named. Then we have corner, safety, specialists. Obviously, offense is pretty basic to deal with. So Mason, without further ado, take it away.
So obviously, the first position you want to talk about is quarterback. And despite what ESPN or some other analysts want to have you learn about, or just say for their own personal input, Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to be the starting quarterback for 2021. I don't understand the current misconception that he's going to go anywhere else because the Packers take a enormous cap hit if he is sent elsewhere.
Yeah.
That the biggest question right now is if Rodgers is going to have his contract reconstructed, which that could be a discussion for a whole other episode because of the drastic effects it could have if he is or isn't restructured. He's an MVP. He's the former MVP this year. He had a great season despite the Packers taking Jordan Love in the first round and trading up for Jordan Love. Rodgers is Rodgers. He's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league. I would say he's the best because he is the MVP, but you got guys like Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. It's pretty much all I have to say about Rodgers because you watch him play and you just see how good he is.
Yeah, for me, just quickly with quarterbacks, the one question I have is, are we going to see Jordan Love dressed as the backup next year, or do they keep Boyle around and Love strictly third string on the bench, sit and develop year again, with Rodgers being at the helm, obviously, for another year?
My biggest question along those lines is, can Jordan Love go out there and be the coin flip guy? That was Tim Boyle's job, right?
That was
he
Timmy
was he was
Boyle's job.
pretty darn good at that, right?
And the kneel down guy at the end of the game.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know if J Love has the kneel down technique yet. Like, he's got to be able to piss off other teams by kneeling down quickly. He's got to be able to go out there and do that. There are a lot of technical things that he has to go do besides just like throwing a football, because anyone can throw a football, but can you kneel down correctly? Can you do the coin toss? No, but obviously I think I was talking to Mason about this before Chris hopped on. I think based off of everything I've heard and everything post-game press or post-year press conferences from Goody and everything, it sounds like they are leaning towards Jordan Love being their backup. They said they want to continue to compete for championships with Jordan Love playing in the preseason and Aaron Rodgers being their starter. They didn't mention Tim Boyle. I mean, to be honest, there's nothing about Tim Boyle that excites me enough to say
no.
I would rather him be our backup. That I would rather him be our backup over the guy we drafted in the first round. Yeah. I at least, and what the last thing I'll say on this is, again, what I said to Mason earlier, if there is a 1% chance even that Aaron Rodgers might not be the Packers quarterback in 2022, Jordan Love has to be your backup the entire season. And just on a base level, that's how you have to operate. So I personally, I would be shocked to see Jordan Love not dress on game days. I mean, hypothetically, I guess you could bring Tim Boyle back. It's not like he's going to break the bank, but I don't inherently see a need to, when you could have Jordan Love sign a guy off the street for the third team, draft him in the 7th round, something like that.
At this point, it's you kind of know what you have in Boyle, for me anyway.
Yeah.
He's been here for quite a while now. Like, Goody loves him. Like, even Boyle was here when Mike McCarthy was still here. But he's a restricted free agent. The most we can really do, if you really want to get really complicated, is place a second-round tender on him, which isn't guaranteed. That second-round tender is almost $3.5 million. If you cut him, you don't take a hit. You can keep him around for the preseason if you want, if there is a preseason anyway. And if, say, a team's starting quarterback or backup quarterback goes down, you ship him off there. That's this case that I could see happening. But to me, as I guess, Jordan Love stan, I can kind of want to see what Love has. And I think we can all kind of see what Boyle is at this point.
Even just for the sanity of Packers fans. Well, sanity / insanity, because like imagine if Jordan Love in his first preseason game goes like 0 for 6 his first 6 throws.
Oh,
it's like the throwing the ball into the net thing all over again, where you just missed.
Yep.
Just complete insanity after it. Like, you can't waste a first round pick or blah blah blah. And you look at it this year, and Trevor Lawrence can't even do that. So.
Okay, that was a couple years ago. That wasn't recent
yeah.
Trevor Lawrence, but yes, I understand the comparison you're making. But yeah, I mean, last thing I'll say is I would just love the Twitter. Either way, even if he goes out there and he's a god during, preseason, I would love to see the guys be like, oh, last year Rodgers, he's out of there. Jordan Love looks great. And I'm like, okay, calm down. It's the preseason.
Just no good or bad, Packers Twitter is going to blow up with Jordan Love takes after 2 games.
Yeah.
It's Packers Twitter is a special place.
That it is.
It's in 2 complete different opposite directions currently.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. So running backs, what do you got for us, Mason?
To me, the running back position's kind of case in point. You can see what it is turning into. We do not have the cap space to probably re-sign Aaron Jones. I saw something this morning that said that the franchise tag for each position has been lowered. And if we did franchise tag Aaron Jones, it would only be $8 million, which is kind of a steal at that price. But is he really going to sign on for that $8 million when he turned down the contract that we reportedly gave him, which was top 5 running back money? But there was some issues from his standpoint about how much money he was getting now compared to later.
I think obviously with Jones, he's priced himself out of Green Bay with his play. Obviously, right? He's arguably a top 5 running back in the game when he's productive and healthy. The interesting one for me is Jamal Williams. I think Jamal's a beloved member of the locker room, a beloved member of the team, a beloved member of the community. And is he back for another year with the Packers? And does he price himself in cheap enough where even with all these salary cap problems that we're currently going through during the pandemic and with the lowered cap, can we bring Jamal back at a relatively low number? And he can still be a productive player for Matt LaFleur and Rodgers. Obviously, we know A.J. Dillon's the guy next year, most likely really productive year, showed flashes of becoming, an every down, 3 down back in the NFL. And lastly, Tyler Irvin's a really interesting one too, because I thought Tyler Irvin, especially in the return game and with motion pre-snap, kind of was that jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife for LaFleur and Rodgers. And I hope they can bring him back on a relatively cheap contract. It's not the end of the world if he's gone. I don't know where you guys are at with that, but that's basically where I'm at with the running back position.
I have another note here. It's about Patrick Taylor, who, again, I'm the draft geek of us 3, and Taylor was signed as an undrafted free agent, and at Memphis, he was actually above Antonio Gibson and Kenneth Gainwell on the depth chart. In 2018, he had over 1,100 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns on the ground. Gibson only had, I don't know the exact number, but it was under 40 career rushing attempts. So if, say, we don't retain, I don't think we have any chance at retaining Aaron Jones, honestly. If we don't retain Jamal Williams, you could see Patrick Taylor being the second running back. I know there's Dexter Williams, but he was on the active roster his first year, but then relegated to the practice squad his second year. So to me, Patrick Taylor could be our change of pace, like scat back kind of like a Jamal Williams really was. Or you could say kind of like a James White, even though people have said, oh, James White could be coming to Green Bay, when we kind of already have a James White and Patrick Taylor.
So Mason, would you compare him more to Jamal Williams or Aaron Jones?
Patrick Taylor?
Yes.
I guess you could kind of say, well, he's tall. He's 6'2". So I would kind of probably say, I'd probably more say Jamal.
Okay.
Because he doesn't really, he has some receiving ability, but he doesn't have the most. He isn't an Aaron Jones type of receiving back, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. I'm going to make a bold take here that am I going to say this live for the internet to see? Yes, I am. I don't think the Packers need Aaron Jones or Jamal Williams.
No.
I'm going to say it. And not even that, like, I don't particularly want them back for how much they will cost, because I've seen enough out of AJ Dillon both in college. It's like I was telling Mason earlier, I'm not a big draft geek. I basically know like the first round guys, and then after that it gets a little suspect, which is why when we did our little mock off season thing, once I got into the second round, I'm like, Mason, who should I draft? Because I don't know what's going on, right?
Mason's best available. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we got to get Mason's big board up here. So we'll do that eventually before the draft.
Another thing that I kind of want to note about another thing to deal with the draft in our running back position is you can draft someone on day 3.
Yep.
In the 6th, 6th, 7th round, and they can immediately just make the roster because Green Bay doesn't usually cut their rookies. So you can have, like, I'll name a name here. Like, today I put up my scouting report on Jermar Jefferson from Oregon State. Green Bay's already had a visit with him. So you could honestly, he's similar to Patrick Taylor, but the running back position is a dime a dozen. Does it really matter? I don't know.
No, not at all.
You can really have a Derrick Henry or a Christian McCaffrey where, like, you saw in Jacksonville this year how an undrafted free agent got over 1,000 yards. So
right. And I've seen enough out of A.J. Dillon to know that he can be the main back in a game in the system with Matt LaFleur, because he's done it multiple times now. I have no concern about that. And so just go find me a third down type back, speedy guy who can catch out of the backfield a little bit. If that's the kid out of, what was it, Oregon State, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's the kid out of Oregon State, if it's, Dexter Williams, Patrick Taylor, particularly, I don't care, because I think one of the biggest reasons any running back can succeed, specifically in Green Bay, is the offensive line, and the focus is on Aaron Rodgers. So not to bash Aaron Jones, but I will 100% say that you put him on a bad team, and he is not going to be anywhere near the player that he was in Green Bay. That is just such a mutually beneficial relationship, him, that offensive line, that scheme. So you go throw him on the Bengals or something like that, kid's not going to be anywhere near as good as he was in Green Bay. So I'm not worried about a running back position at all. I would much rather spend the money on Corey Linsley, J.J. Watt, anything like that than Aaron Jones.
All right, are you two good to move on to receiver then?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right, so I guess everyone knows that Green Bay didn't really draft a receiver last year. Well, I think this year you can't really blame the receiver position for not making it to the Super Bowl. The receivers were fine. Obviously, you could get better, but I think for me, honestly, I didn't see the receiver spot being an issue in the NFC Championship. If we had a second receiver, say who was available during the time of the draft, if you want a T. Higgins, if you want Michael Pittman, that doesn't help us for how we lost the NFC Championship game.
Rodgers threw for 346 yards.
Yeah. So he did.
Obviously, you have Devontae Adams, who I would say is one of the best 2 receivers in the league. A lot of people that I know like to make fun of me for my Allen Lazard love, because I've been on him since the draft too. But of course, MVS, St. Brown, you don't really have the quote unquote number 2 guy that most other teams have, but you have guys that can make plays. And really, to me, the biggest thing we're missing is a slot guy or like a gadget type player since Patrick Taylor's leaving. I mean, not Patrick Taylor, but I'm messing up his name here, Tyler Irvin. Because Tyler Irvin's an unrestricted free agent or restricted free agent or whatever. He isn't going to – we need a new gadget-type player. And looking ahead to the draft, there is some of those. So whether that be in round 3, round 1, whatever you want to take it, I don't really think receiver is as big of a need as some people make it out to be. I don't know about you guys, though.
Receiver is such a polarizing position in Green Bay where, especially behind Adams, these guys are in a microscope where they need to step up. And if they don't, there's drops. There's just so much pressure on guys like Lazard, Valdez-Scantling, Equinemius, St. Brown. And I'm with you. I think especially that group of younger players showed flashes, especially this year behind Adams, where I don't think receivers up on the higher end list of needs heading into this offseason, where if we were able to re-sign Lazard, even bring back a guy like Malik Taylor, who I think has a lot of talent and can really succeed in the LaFleur system, where we'll be fine heading into next year and we'll be good to go for another run at the Super Bowl.
A note that you said there, Lazard is a exclusive rights free agent, which he has no say pretty much. Gutekunst hands him a paper. If he signs it, he plays. If he doesn't play it, he doesn't play next year. That contract is only $850,000. So if you want to tell me that Lazard is not worth $850,000, I might tell you to screw off, but because that's not true. But it's pretty much nothing for our second receiver on the roster.
The one name here was kind of a tough situation all year was Devin Funchess, obviously opting out due to COVID after signing with the Packers. I don't think he'll be back next year. I obviously expect the team and him to go their separate ways, but I thought he could contribute. Obviously, it's a tough situation with the pandemic and him opting out due to personal reasons, but
another thing with Funchess is during his year in Indianapolis, he missed most of that season too, so he's almost been out 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
And we could save about $1.3 million if we just cut him, and you could bring him back on a veteran minimum because he hasn't played in 2 years. So no, I don't really think anyone would really want that for more than the veteran minimum right now.
Yeah, the thing to me, if assuming that this one switch happens, I'm honestly fine with the same receiver group. I need MVS to be the clear number 2 in order for me to be pretty satisfied with them not taking a high round wide receiver, which I would be shocked if they do. There are too many needs in other places for them to do that. But if MVS can be the true number 2, like I said, him taking the steps with his footwork, things like that, if he can go get me 750, 800 yards, something along those lines. He doesn't even have to touch 1,000. Obviously, if he does, you get 2,000-yard receivers. That's incredible. But if he can be the clear number 2 option, that takes even more pressure off Allen Lazard, which is where he thrives. And yeah, to your point, Mason, kid was the best blocking receiver in the NFL. He's absolutely worth way more than $850,000.
Phenomenal.
The fact that we can get him at that price is ridiculous.
I'll say one more point about one of these receivers, and then we'll move on to tight ends. But midway through the season, we signed Tavon Austin, and at first I was excited, but he showed that he doesn't have the burst that he used to have. I mean, he was fine for like a locker room presence, but he wasn't the same player.
Not the same player now.
Yeah. Like the fumbles on the punts, punt returns, we didn't even trust him to return kicks. He's not coming back.
No, I expect they go their separate ways with Tavon.
Yeah, I agree.
You guys ready to move on to tight ends then?
Yep.
All right. So we said earlier about the whole entire Robert Tonyan breakout. First thing to notice about him is he is a restricted free agent. The word around the street is that the Packers will place a second-round tender on him, meaning that a team can match that tender. But if they do and the Packers don't give up, if a team places a second-round tender on him as well, then Green Bay gets a second-round pick in return for Tonyan, which to me, that's here, have him then at that point. Because we have some depth behind him at tight end. And that second-round tender is already $3.5 million, which, again, is a steal for Tonyan. A lot of the things you'll see on the Packers roster is you have some players on, bona fide steals for their contracts. You see it in Lazard. You see it in Tonyan right now. Obviously, he could – after this year, you could see Tonyan get that multi-year extension where he's a top 10 paid tight end. But for me, you have to see the continued growth. If it's just this 1 year and you pay him already that big contract, then what happens if he busts? Similar to a player on the defensive line like we'll be talking about later. But if that happens, then you have guys like Jay Sternberger behind him. And the next big thing I'll say is that of the big free agents that I think we should sign, which is including Corey Linsley, that's a bit of a hot take here, but I would much rather, I think getting on to the offensive line a bit more here, but I think we're kind of fine to move on from Corey Linsley, honestly. But Mercedes Lewis should probably be the top priority kind of free agent for us because Lewis has his role on the team. He's a blocking tight end. Without him on the team, we can't run a lot of the plays that we run. He was on his own blocking edge rushers on runs most of the time. And Green Bay kind of needs him. He's a presence in the locker room. The team even bought Matt LaFleur a Mercedes Lewis jersey for Christmas one year. That just shows how much the team believes in his abilities. He signs on for a 1-year contract on under $4 million each year for the 3 years that he's been on the team. He can easily be brought back for that price. I think he will be because he's the best blocking tight end in the league for me anyway.
Yeah.
I think quickly. Oh, sorry, MJ, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I don't want to bash Robert Tonyan because I think he was incredible, but I mean, you guys watched all of the games just as much as I did. There wasn't really a play where Robert Tonyan just burned somebody or just made an incredible play. Not to bash the guy, but he was just wide open all the time. And so, in my opinion, you put Sternberger, DeGuara, even freaking Dominique Daphne, who I love. I think he's going to be really important next year. You put one of those guys in that situation, most of the time they're also going to be wide open. So to your point, Mason, Mercedes Lewis, I agree, is the most important. All of those other 3 guys I mentioned are still going to be there. So if they can somehow get a second-round pick out of Tonyan, by all means, be my guest.
Especially in this class as deep as it is at some of the positions that we need. Yeah.
Just quickly, I think Jay Sternberger's got to be fighting for a roster spot next year, no? You saw –
I think he is, but at the same time, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And in the games that he's been able to be on the field, I think he's proven that he can be a starting caliber tight end for us. Fun fact.
I agree with you. I think the talent's there, and obviously he's battled some tough injuries and struggled to stay on the field. But they draft Josiah DeGuara. Obviously, we know what the kind of year Robert Tonyan had. But even Dominique Daphne was showing out in a couple playoff games where if Sternberger doesn't come in and have, flashes and show out in training camp in the preseason, is he on that bubble where the Packers can move on and go in another direction?
I think he has too much raw talent.
Yeah.
I think this year, so if they have Tonyan, I don't think they need Sternberger. If they don't have Tonyan, I wouldn't love them losing Tonyan and Sternberger. I think they'd still be okay.
Our tight end production would go.
Yeah. But if they bring Tonyan back, I don't think Sternberger really has that much need to be there. Well, if they have Tonyan and Mercedes back.
Yeah. Another fun fact about Sternberger was up through the whole entire pre-draft process, I would go on a few sites and I would look at the prospect meetings tracker for the Packers. Green Bay had met with Sternberger 2 or 3 times before the pre-draft process. And so while everyone else had us drafting Jake Butt and TJ Hawkinson Noah Fant in the first round during that draft, I had us taking Sternberger at the pick that he actually went. I remember sitting there watching the TV. My dad was right next to me. I said, this pick is
basic hyper.
Pretty much. But I'd like to say Mason Jeremiah because I'm not an ESPN guy, but
that's fair.
Another thing is similar to Mercedes Lewis, I feel that Josiah DeGuara has his role on the team. Similar.
Yep.
He is our Kyle Juszczyk in his own way. He can play fullback, he can play tight end, H-back, whatever you want it to be. And I didn't like the pick, obviously, when it was announced.
Yeah, Jeff heard.
I think
really.
I think that was pretty famously brought to point in my draft review article. But he has his role on the team. Obviously, I wouldn't draft a fullback in round 3, but in the first game where he was available, I don't know if he got injured that game or the next week, but in week 1 against Minnesota, you could see the way that they were trying to use him. If you look back on Game Pass, they were motioning him out to slot receiver, tight end, fullback, whatever you want it to be. He can do what his role is, but to me it was, do you really want to spend a 3rd round pick on a tight end? Fullback.
Just quickly on DeGuara, does he become more important in the later years of Aaron Rodgers, where LaFleur wants to become more of a power running team with DeGuara in as the lead blocker, leading the way for whoever, A.J. Dillon, or plug in X, Y, and Z at running back, obviously adding more positional value and as he fights for a roster spot, obviously.
Yeah, especially if with a guy like Dillon, Dillon is just primarily between the tackles runner.
Yep. So
you can just send DeGuara just through the middle as a lead blocker, and Dillon just finds his way through there. MJ, do you have anything to say?
No, I think I've covered everything for tight end position.
One last name here. If Mercedes Lewis is not brought back, I feel like Isaac Nada, who was brought in on a futures contract through the practice squad, could kind of take over in that role. Obviously not be as good, but he has that blocking tight end type. He can catch some balls, but our tight end room, you kind of know what you have, but it's intriguing.
Yep.
You have guys like Tunyon, Sternberger, Dominique Daphne, who can all catch the ball, and you have Jose DeGuara, and I guess you could kind of throw in Nada in that role where they know what their role is. You guys ready to move to
Alrighty, offensive line. Let's do it.
All right, so I guess let's start off with the elephant in the room. What do you guys think happens with Cory Linsley?
Hold up. Before we I pulled up Mason's draft recap.
Oh boy.
I want to take a look at his review for Josiah DeGuara just real quick, so that everybody knows. So that everybody knows what we're dealing with here. Round 3, pick 94, Josiah DeGuara, tight end, Cincinnati. It was a shot through some hearts as Devin Duvernay went 2 picks before this selection to the Ravens, which led to this selection. I'm a firm believer that Jay Sternberger is very capable of carving out a role as Green Bay's starting tight end. Well, that took a big blow with the selection of DeGuara, who many thought is a 5th-round pick at best, including myself. He is more of a fullback as he played the position at the Senior Bowl instead of tight end. The pick made no sense and was a horrific reach. Thrown hat count, not worth the energy anymore. Grade F.
We need a live camera shot on Primetime Sports Talk of Mason Thompson's basement on draft night of his thrown hat counts.
It would have been very bad because we did have a live stream last year. It would have been bad.
After that pick.
That is just
swear words.
Let's not look at the John Runyon grade there either, please.
To give context, he only threw 1 hat on Jordan Love and gave it a C+.
It's a stat sheet.
And he threw countless hats with DeGuara.
We'll get
in the minority for Jordan Love hat throws.
We'll get to the Love pick at that one position later on. So back to the offensive line. What are you guys' thoughts on Cory Linsley's contract situation?
Okay.
I think they're making room to make a run at re-signing Cory Linsley. I could be wrong here, but I think he's just such a valuable piece up front to what the Packers do. And obviously first team All-Pro last season. It's been Aaron Rodgers center since the last 5 or 6 years. I think he's just such an important piece in the running game protections, where if they were to lose him and we have to go to, Elton Jenkins or whoever it is at center, I'm kind of worried about the last couple of years of Rodgers and we start rotating pieces in and out at center.
So Elton Jenkins, his last 26 games in college were started at center. So in a vacuum, here's the situation where I'm comfortable losing Cory Linsley. Number one, if they put Elton Jenkins at center, I need the Packers, to the best of their ability, to draft a guy at 29 who is as much of an Elton Jenkins as possible. I need him to either be able to play both tackles or tackle guard. You need to draft the most versatile guard offensive lineman in the world, if possible. Because
you want me to list off some names?
In a moment, I'll let you list off names in a second. The other thing I will say is I think Stepaniak, is that how you say it?
I think it's something like that. Stepaniak.
Yeah.
Like
so
that.
I need Stepaniak to play. I need him to dress and be healthy because he is a very versatile guy. Obviously, we didn't really see anything from him this year. So if we draft somebody in the first round that is versatile, I'm going to throw out my draft knowledge here real quick, the very limited draft knowledge I have. And I know Mason doesn't love this, so I'm partially just going to say this to piss him off. The one name I've heard thrown out there a lot is Alex Leatherwood.
I mean,
I know Mason doesn't love him.
It's not too horrible, but I would rather. He is primarily, a lot of people see him as a tackle. A lot of people just see him as strictly a guard. I have not completely done my full study on him, but of the players that I could see us drafting at 29, you could go with a Jalen Mayfield. You could go with, say, Leatherwood, although I'd be fine with it, but I wouldn't really be the happiest depending on what else is on the board. Mayfield, Leatherwood, you could go Elijah Vera Tucker, who's played center and tackle at USC.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
There's some guys like later on that thing that Green Bay has done throughout the years is they have hit very well on offensive linemen in the later rounds, specifically the fourth round. So I think we could get a guy. I don't really want to throw out any names. I guess I could say like Brady Christensen from BYU, but there isn't. I could see us drafting tackle in round one, tackle guard, whatever it may be, but there's so much depth in this offensive line class that you can get that later.
And with the tackle position being, we know what it is. We know who's up for UFA, who's going to be back on the roster next year. Do you two expect that's where they'll go in the first round? Or do you think they can wait for a later round selection?
I could see Green Bay likes to double and sometimes even triple up on positions. Like they've done it with running back, receiver last year. They did it with interior offensive line, which that's kind of why I think we could kind of deal with the loss of Linsley, because we have John Runyon, you have Stepaniak, you have Jake Hansen, who was the player that the one player that they drafted last year that was cut and then brought back on the practice squad later on in the year. I think if all ends well, maybe Hansen could develop and be that center, but I could see Jenkins moving over to center. I could see Runyon being left guard. I could see Lucas Patrick being right guard, and then you could have Billy Turner at right tackle now that we've cut Rick Wagner. And then you still have guys like you have Ben Braden, you could bring back Lane Taylor on a veteran minimum because like we said about Funchess, he's been injured the last 2 years.
Yeah.
He could be brought back on a veteran minimum. But for your point, I could see them drafting a tackle in the first round or the second round and then doubling up on day 3.
And just quickly with the O-line too is we don't know the status of where's David Bakhtiari going to be injury-wise heading into week 1 next year, because Bakhtiari's arguably the best player on the Packers, right? And just so much, leaving him on an island against top-tier edge rushers in the league. And if he can't go and he's out for the first couple of weeks of the season, that's an important piece to lose in an NFC that features some pretty fearsome pass rushers. So,
especially in our division.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say, we have the depth to deal with it. Obviously, best center in the league last year. I want him back. But we have the depth to deal with it. There's the deep draft class like Mason talked about. So I think either way we will be okay. But obviously we'd like to have him back.
I'm more confident in the interior of our offensive line than I am our tackles currently.
Yeah,
I agree.
Especially considering the fact of Bakhtiari's injury, because with that, you could also move Jenkins over to – Jenkins could end up playing left tackle in the first month if Bakhtiari isn't ready. But who does that move over to center? That's why I think – I mean, yeah. But you could – that's
where it gets dicey.
That's why I kind of like the idea of doubling up if you know where Bakhtiari is at injury-wise with his recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready to move to defense?
D lineman. Let's do it.
Real quick, defensive line. I love Kenny Clark. Rest of it is suspects. I would love Snacks back on a veteran minimum. just honestly to have him mentor Kenny Clark, mentor the other guys. Kiki showed me a little promise, but I'm gonna be honest. I need a draft pick here at some point. And I would not. I don't know the guys that it could be, but I would not be upset if we waited on offensive line a little bit and went interior defensive line real quick.
Interior defensive line class, getting ahead to the draft, as this is kind of a bit of a just outlook on the whole entire offseason. Interior defensive line class there's no real like top prospect. I guess you could see there's Christian Barmore, but the whole interior defensive line class is, you don't know where the first one's going to go. And unless they have pass rush ability, like you could say like a Javon Kinlaw from last year, who has pass rush ability like Kenny Clark has, I don't think you take an interior defensive lineman in the first round. You can get a guy in the third or the fourth round that gives you what Dean Lowry got us last year.
Yeah.
Especially with them being where they are in regards to the salary cap. And you look at a guy like Dean Lowry, and is he a guy in the next couple weeks that finds himself being a quick cut from the roster before the new league year sets to start? And then we're really thin at the D-line position after we obviously know what Kenny Clark is. And I look at guys like, if they can bring back Tyler Lancaster, Montravius Adams is another one where he's shown flashes of being like an every down D lineman, mega talented, but he's run into some problems off the field where the D-line position, it's dicey because obviously it kind of got exposed last year a little bit at times where it could be a need really early in the draft if we want to be where we want to be next year.
So just here's the numbers on Dean Lowry being cut. If it's a pre-June 1st cut, you say the Packers save about $3.5 million. And then if it's a post-June 1st cut, you save $4.5 million. And Tyler Lancaster, similar to Tunyon, as mentioned earlier, is a restricted free agent. The most we can really do for that is place the original round tender on him, which is about $2.25 million, which I guess is fine, but I would maybe look to bring him back for cheaper than that. I don't really. I guess this is something that needs to be brought up. I think is the last Ted Thompson draft is pretty much gone.
Yep.
That was Kevin King with a 33rd pick after a trade down from the first round with Cleveland. He is getting ahead, but he's gone. Josh Jones has been gone, which I'm still upset about that because if he had just played dime linebacker, then he would have been fine. And then Adams was our 3rd round pick. And Vince Beagle was our 4th round pick, and he's now in Miami. So it was not a good class at all.
And that's why he's gone.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to address that, but we'll figure something. You know what, boys? What would make that position better?
It couldn't possibly just be J.J. Watt, could it?
A young man named J.J. Watt.
J.J. Watt.
And I brought this up on my other Packers show last week. I feel like a traitor now, but what I said was we brought up the idea, and I don't want to talk about this too much because we don't have much time, but basically, given the discussion we just had about being okay with losing Corey Linsley hypothetically, I would rather have J.J. Watt than Corey Linsley because I think we could deal with losing Corey Linsley, like we just said, hypothetically in a vacuum. But I think our defensive line needs help. And the idea of a defensive line, just picture this. Close your eyes. Picture this. Za'Darius Smith, J.J. Watt, Kenny Clark, and Rashawn Gary playing playoff Rashawn Gary. That 4-man defensive line, I'm in heaven. I have nothing else to say.
And with Watt, I know you two have screaming at the TV when opposing player bursts off a long run. Watt's a premier run defender too. We forget about that. And he can move up and down the D line, play on the inside, play on the outside in pass rushing situations. So obviously it'd be a home run if we land him. Pray for it, but we'll see where that ends up over the next couple weeks.
Who are two people who were 1 and 2 respectively in double team rates last year. That would be Mr. J.J. Watt and Mr. Zadarius Smith. And they were both top 5 in win rates as well. So you get those two dudes on the same line, it's over. It's over. You don't need. We can cut Preston Smith. We can cut the rest of the edge rushers. Just give me Z, Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, J.J. Watt. All our problems are fixed.
I mean, that kind of moves us into the next. It moves us into the next position, which is edge rushers. And I'll say this right now: it's 2021. Stop using left defensive end. Stop using outside linebacker. Use interior defensive line, edge rushers, and off-ball linebackers. But
he said the word.
The word.
As said, as MJ mentioned, Preston Smith is gone. He's being cut.
Yeah.
We saved $8 million with a pre-June 1st cut and then $12 million with a post-June 1st cut. I wasn't a big fan of the Rashawn Gary pick for the reason that we signed both Smiths in free agency. But after looking at it now and seeing what really has turned out, I'm glad we did it. Zadarius and Rashawn Gary is a nasty edge rush duo with Kenny Clark in the middle of the defensive line and whoever else we sign or draft on the interior. I do not really know the role that Randy Ramsey and Jonathan Garvin play. I am going to look at Tiba Galea. I had him as a priority free agent last year, and there were some personality type issues that caused him to fall in the draft, but he was showing out in camp, if I am correct. And it was kind of a surprise to me that he wasn't on the active roster, but we did sign him to a futures contract. And I think if you need a depth pass rusher behind Zadarius and Rashawn Gary, Tiba Galea is perfect.
This was probably my most disappointing position group late in the year this season, especially that NFC Championship game where they couldn't get any pressure on Tom Brady. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Rashawn Gary. Brady stood back there, much to the dismay of Packer fans everywhere, and picked the defense apart at times where we pay these two a lot of money. And Zadarius, he had like a pretty good year, but I think he was more in spurts where he would go games where he'd have 1.5 sacks and then kind of disappear for a while. Whereas Preston, we know, obviously disappointing after the year he had a season ago. Rashawn Gary did show flashes of being, like I said earlier, an every down player for this defense. But overall, with this group, I was disappointed. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
It was a lot more disappointing than 2019 where Smith Bros were just not a role for most of the year.
Yeah.
Thing quickly, too, is remember, like, every big third down, those third down sacks that Smith Brothers would get, where this year they gave up some third and 8, 3rd and 9, just couldn't get there. I was just brutal.
Okay. I'm setting a timer for 5 minutes. Chris and I are not going to say a word, and then we'll speed through corner and safety after this. So I'm going to mute myself. Mason,
Me too.
On the count of 3, it's all yours. You have 5 minutes to say whatever you want, and Chris and I will see you in 5 minutes. So 1, 2, 3, go.
Oh, nice of you guys. So let me look in depth at the complete liability that is the Packers off-ball linebacker core. But this was a big staple of mine for almost the last 2 years. Every time a big run just pops off, is it the interior defensive line or is it our complete liability of a linebacker room? That included Christian Kirksey, who got cut this past weekend. But for years since A.J. Hawk has been gone, the Packers have just not addressed their off-ball linebacker room. If you look at it now, you have pretty much just a bunch of bodies that could maybe turn into rotational backup guys. That includes Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin. Chris Barnes was actually better than Kamal Martin to me. And Barnes was even playing with a club during the playoff games. You don't have that true Mike linebacker that the new defense coordinator, Joe Barry, needs. Like, he did okay with the linebackers that the Rams had for their number one defense, but there was still times where their defense just got gashed in the run game. There's been disappointments. Kamal Barton was fine. Barnes was actually pretty good. He could be that Sam or Will linebacker, but you don't have, like I said, you don't have that Shroom that has that complete skill set where you can stop the run, you can cover, and you don't have that. I thought you had it in Oren Burks, but he hasn't been able to see the field or be healthy. One of the two, maybe both. I don't know why he hasn't seen the field when he is a former safety. He can cover. He looks fast. From the film that I saw when he was playing at Vanderbilt, he looked like he could solve our linebacker woes, but he's pretty much just been inactive or just – he made some plays on special teams last year that kind of made me feel like, oh, is this the breakout he really needs? But I guess the coaching staff has kind of given up on him. Ty Summers kind of the same thing. He's just that third-string linebacker that has shown some flashes but can't manage to find the field. I don't know. Last year when we traded up for Jordan Love, I thought that pick was for Patrick Queen. That was why the hat was thrown. But Patrick Queen obviously didn't do the greatest this year in Baltimore. He was one of the worst coverage linebackers in the league. But I still think, well, that could also be because of how difficult Baltimore's defensive scheme is. But Patrick Queen, as bad as he was, is still better than Chris Barnes and Kamal Martin. I think that if one of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or Zaven Collins falls to us in the first round, you take that, run the card up. Second round, you could take a Baron Brown, you could take a Jabril Cox. At the end of the first, or even in the second, you could take Nick Bolton, Jazz Surratt, any of those guys. The linebacker room needs to be addressed, and it has been needed to be addressed for however long now. So if you guys want to come back, I'm done with my rant.
It's a miracle. It only took him 3 minutes.
Question for both of you is how much of it, I know where we're at with our linebacking core, but how much of it was scheme with Mike Pettin and obviously the combination of lack of talent too? Because I don't know where you guys are at, but I felt like at times Pettin kind of left those young linebackers to be exposed a little bit, especially in the run game and in passing situations. So obviously it's Mason Thompson's favorite position group to address, but that was just a question I had for you two.
You could say the same thing about when Martinez was here.
Yep,
but Martinez didn't. He was a good run stuffer. That's all he was good for. He didn't have the athletic ability. We don't have a good athlete at the linebacker position. You can't just have big thumpers in the middle of the field anymore. You have to have guys that can cover the middle of the field, where we were a complete liability to last year and the year before.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. They're just, yeah, they haven't drafted athletes at that position, and it's unfortunate, but no scheme can save that with the way the game is played now, unfortunately.
Especially when we play in a division with Eric Kendricks and Roquan Smith running around the field all game long for 60 minutes.
And then the Bucs linebackers,
Yeah. You kind of intertwined Jelani Tabai in that in some way. He was drafted in the second round. He hasn't turned out, but he is in that type where he's an athlete. He can roam the middle of the field and kind of make plays.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick, corner. We have one of the top two corners in the NFL, Jair Alexander. Nothing really to say about that. Kevin King going bye-bye. Josh Jackson, for some reason, they just decided to stop playing him. Some people love him. Some people hate him. Chandon Sullivan, that experiment failed. Basically.
I wouldn't say that. I still have faith because obviously, like Lazard, I'm a big Chandon Sullivan guy, but he did good, and he was actually leading the league in slot passer rating through the first 6 weeks. That's when I made the article about him saying the best player you've never heard of. And so, of course, he's still young. He originally was a safety or an outside corner in Philadelphia. He isn't really comfortable yet in the slot, I would say, completely yet. So when you have a 20-year veteran like Tom Brady, obviously he's going to be exposed.
Yeah.
Just quickly, Kevari Russell, I think, is a name to watch. We saw him get called. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Mason. We saw him called up active, I think, for the playoff game against the Rams, where on their practice squad all year. We've heard reports about showing flashes in practice of being a contributor for this Packers defense, where I don't know where you guys are at with that, but
he was active over both Josh Jackson and Kadar Holman. So that is both an intel at Russell's development and both of Jackson's and Kadar Holman. I could say that both Russell and Stanford Samuels, who also signed a futures contract, if I was a betting man, which I kind of want to be at this point, but I would bet that both Samuels and Russell make the team next year.
Okay.
You could. My biggest thing right now is I like this cornerback class. You can take any Asante Samuel Jr. at the end of the first round. We've already had a visit with him. You could take, say, a Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, Greg Newsome, Ifeadi Melifonwu, any of those guys in the second round. There are ways to upgrade this cornerback class, and similar to running back or receiver, you could also double or triple dip here if need be, because we have just never been able to figure out this cornerback room. We've spent so many high draft picks here, and it's just continuously we just roll through it, and cornerback continues to be just a top need for us. It's frustrating.
I will say I trust Goody a lot more to actually, like, if we do double or triple down on corner, I trust his picks a lot more than I've trusted the cornerback picks in the past. So, I mean, it's something that really needs to be addressed, whether that probably not be through free agency, because I don't think we have the money to go out and get somebody in free agency. So it's going to have to be development from inside what we have right now in draft picks. So, I mean, that room probably will not be at the level we want it to be next year, but it'll be, I mean, you got Jair, so you will be okay, give or take.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we probably won't spend much time on specialists, but safety, Amos, Savage, incredible. I really liked Raven Green personally. I think he's a guy I would like to have back to play kind of a hybrid role between, linebacker, safety kind of in there.
Great blitzer too.
Yeah. The thing with Raven Green is he's only played around 460 snaps the last 3 years due to injuries. So are you really wanting him to be brought back on that $2 million original round tender for his restricted free agency, or do you just throw Vernon Scott in his role, which is a much seamless transition for him?
I mean, yeah, I'd be fine with Scott there.
Me too.
I mean, you could also, I like the idea of having Savage in kind of a Buda Baker role like Arizona has for him. I think that if need be, you could take, as much as it doesn't seem to be a need, you could take a safety on the back end of day 2, early day 3. I'd like to see us take someone like Ardarius Washington, who I have as my second safety in the draft right now. But I could really see us using more 3 safety sets, which is something that the Rams used a lot last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also kind of like the idea of Henry Black playing more. He kind of showed some spurts of good action last year, even though he kind of got burned in the NFC Championship game, I think, if I am correct.
Yeah, he did. It's
okay.
Okay.
Not too much time to be spent here behind Amos and Savage, and then the rest is just kind of a revolving door of players.
Yeah, I'd like to get some more depth here if possible.
Yeah, I agree, because I think to your point, Mason, you can alleviate some of the stress on the corners.
Yeah,
if you want to play a third safety.
You can play Savage in a nickel role, and that kind of takes off the pressure on whoever may be our second corner or Sullivan now.
Yeah, I agree. And then specialists. I don't think Crosby's going anywhere. J.K. Scott, for love of all that's good and right in the world. Crosby?
Is he back next year? No, J.K. Scott.
Oh, J.K. Scott,
Do you think
please
they go
no.
punter in the draft?
Please no. I don't care where they get a punter. It can't be worse. It cannot be worse.
I mean, he had a good 2019. He had a good 2019, but last year was just.
Here's my thing. I think he didn't punt enough in 2020. Yeah. I think he got out of practice. Yeah, he forgot how to punt.
Yeah.
And I'm only being half sarcastic there.
Yeah.
I actually think he forgot how to punt with people running at him.
Yeah. The Jacksonville game was yikes.
Yeah. So he kind of screwed us over in the Tampa game too.
Yeah.
What was it, 30-yard punt that just completely flipped the
Yeah.
field?
Another thing here is we do have 2 specialist signs to futures contracts, JJ Molson, who's a kicker, and then Ryan Winslow, who's a punter. There is some cap space that can be saved if we do cut Crosby, which not a lot of fans will like that, but we had the idea, I think, was it this last year, was it the year before, that we also had another kicker in camp that performed better than Crosby in the preseason, and yet Crosby still stayed.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, Crosby, they had a kicker, and I know this was mostly because of COVID, but like if they do want to, they had a kicker in camp in practice every single week because of COVID, just in case, on the practice squad. So, I mean, if they do want to move on from Crosby, they have that capability. I don't see that happening.
I don't expect it either, no.
Maybe.
But they could do it if they are desperate for money and they need to save a little bit of cash. They could do it, but I don't see that happening.
There's other ways to get money back. Like Lowry and Smith can save us $16 million almost, and then we're already over into positive cap space, and then
restructure Rodgers and rework Adrian Amos. Oh, we'll save that for next week.
Yes, we'll save that for next week. But yeah, we have gone through all of the positions, given a little bit of an outlook. We'll get more into free agency and the draft specifically in the next couple episodes, so we can get down into nitty gritty of Mason schooling us on what the draft is, because I don't know what the draft is. I've never heard of that. And then, free agency, I'll throw out a couple wild things because there's a couple random guys that I would like the Packers to target. So, gentlemen, any last words?
No.
Oh, thanks, fellas. This is fun. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll be back next Tuesday. As always, make sure to go to primetimesportstalk.com. They are taking good care of us there. So check out Mason's random draft articles, whatever it is Chris does, and then my random crap that mostly hasn't been coming out because I haven't written in a while there because I'm doing social media stuff. But yeah, that's what we're up to. So make sure to check out primetimesportstalk.com and have a wonderful week.